Hello and welcome to the Book, Business, and Brand Building Summit. I am your host, Jesse Krieger, and I'm joined today by my good friend, fellow author, and lifestyle entrepreneur, Tyler Basu. Tyler, how you doing?
Jesse, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure. And let me just shift so that we can alternate the screens. And so, before we jump into this interview, a little bit of overview on the summit. Of course, the Book, Business, and Brand Building Summit is all about how to leverage your book to really build a thriving business and brand. And, the premise here is that, as an author, you spend so much time putting in the effort to create a book. And really, at the end of the day, it's not the biggest earning opportunity. In fact, it's one of the best business development tools you can have that enables things like coaching, live events, masterminds, online training programs. And so our focus here on the Book, Business, Brand Building Summit is how to really use a book and how entrepreneurs can become authors in a way that's strategic. And so, I'm excited to introduce a little bit more formally now Tyler, because he's somebody that has not only done this with his book, Lifestyle Business Blueprint, which I'm actually featured in, which I'm very grateful for, but he's also got a podcast and he does content marketing and he has a number of other channels and avenues and ways that he works with clients that have both been enabled work as an author, but also, contrasting with that informs how he does writing and how he approaches content in general. And that's one of the things we're going to be diving in depth today. So with that being said, Tyler, maybe you can give everybody a little bit of a background on, what got you to the point where you ultimately decided to write a book and step out into building this business that you have now.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Actually set out to become like an online marketer or lifestyle entrepreneur, anything like that. A few years back, I was in real estate. And so from 2011 to 2013, I was going to school to learn real estate, but I wasn't 100% sure that was what I wanted to do. And so I wanted to learn about other businesses and other opportunities that existed. So my way of learning that, I guess, was to reach out to people and to interview them. And this was before I knew about podcasting. So I set up a basic blog, started reaching out to entrepreneurs that I wanted to interview. By the time I ended up becoming a realtor, I had interviewed about 30 people, and then I launched the podcast, and I kept hosting the podcast while I worked as a realtor for a couple of years. So I ended up doing a little over 100 interviews. I think around number 30 was when I figured out what podcasting was, so I launched my first podcast then. You were actually a guest on that show. This was probably back in 2014 when we first connected.
Tell everybody the name of that podcast too, just so we get it on the record.
Yeah, that was called Chatting with Champions.
Yeah.
And so in that process of interviewing, entrepreneurs like yourself, I started to learn about online business. I started to learn about creating content and publishing content online and building an audience that way. Now, a lot of people have the opposite approach where they are an entrepreneur already. They already have a business. They already have products and services. And for them, creating content is a way to market their business. For me, it was backwards. Before I had my own business, I was creating content. And in that process, I learned to build a business using my content to promote it. So in 2015, so fast forward a couple of years after doing the podcast and doing things like blogging and then taking some of the things I was learning and publishing ebooks, I decided to leave real estate behind to do the online, get into the online world full time. And so in that summer of 2015 was when I started a digital magazine, business magazine, where we feature different entrepreneurs in the magazine. We have articles from them. I'll sometimes interview them and kind of turn that into a case study or a success story, put that in the magazine. We had the first issue, got in the App Store in September. And then we launched a podcast called the Lifestyle Business Magazine Podcast in November. And so I've been using, content to promote the magazine. It's a paid subscription, the magazine itself, but the podcast, the blogs, the social media channels, all those things, that's where we share stuff for free, and it drives people to the magazine. And then I've been able to help a few entrepreneurs as well use content marketing to build their business. So I've helped people start podcasts, help people start blogs. I've helped different companies with their content marketing strategies. So that kind of is what consumes all my time right now. It's split between the magazine and helping other entrepreneurs with their content as well. But yeah, that's kind of the short story of the journey, I guess.
Oh, it's funny. I was going to say that was a pretty comprehensive, pretty comprehensive overview. But I think what's fascinating, in your case is you're somebody that I consider pretty prolific in terms of, you've really created on a number of different channels through both audio on the 2 different podcasts now, as well as in the written medium. And of course, we're here doing a video interview. And, for somebody that's watching this and, taking into account how you've become now involved in almost every conceivable form of media and content creation, what advice would you give to somebody that's sort of watching us and listening to this and maybe feels a little bit overwhelmed by all the different possibilities that are out there? Maybe put another way, if you were to go back 2, 3, 4 years ago when you were just getting started, knowing what you know now, would you take a different approach? And, what would that be in a more linear fashion?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, there are different types of mediums or different types of content. The big 3 are the written content, then there's audio, and then there's video. And then from those 3, there's all kinds of ways you can promote it. Like if you were to take written content, for example, that could be on your own blog, that could be in a book, that could be on somebody else's blog, that could be an update on social media. There's a lot of places you can put words, right? So what I would tell myself to answer your question is don't try to tackle of content or be in all places at the same time. The best tip I can give somebody is to pick one thing and stick with that for a while until you really feel like you understand that form of content or that way of publishing your message. Get comfortable with that, get that going, get a system in place for how it's done, and before you tackle something else. Now, when you experience this, and a lot of people who are just getting into the whole online business or digital publishing world, they see some of those high level entrepreneurs where they're everywhere. They've got their YouTube channels, they've got their podcasts, they've got books, they're speaking in person, they're on every social platform, they're doing Snapchats, they're doing Periscopes, they're doing Facebook Lives, like they're all over the place. Keep in mind that they're using was one step that they had to learn in their journey. They didn't learn them all on the same day. So rather than trying to learn everything, all at once, one thing, stick to it for a few months. If you decide that maybe that's not the right channel and maybe not right the form for you, then it's probably okay to drop it. But if you are comfortable with it, you feel like you've got that one down before you add the next one and you add the next one. And the next thing you know, 2-3 years will go by and you'll be on all these different channels and you'll have a ton of content that's getting your message out there for you, so that you're not hustling every day to try to share it, to try to get your message in front of somebody. You'll have all these assets in different forms that exist online that bring exposure to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's really good. There's a few things I want to dive into there. And I think that's really useful, especially, considering like writing a book, for example, is a big undertaking, but so is creating a podcast, so is creating a magazine. And, I guess in line with that question of like, how would you do that differently or where would you start? I think perhaps an even better question or a good follow-up question is, how do you know if and when you've put in this amount of work, if it's time to say, okay, that didn't work and let's try something else, or to redouble your efforts and put an even greater emphasis on the channel that you're pursuing? Because I think sometimes it can be you can spend a lot of time and energy putting into something, but then if you don't get results right away, some people just give up. But the reality is that any worthwhile undertaking is going to require a considerable amount of effort to get past the starting line and start to build some momentum on its own. So do you have any insight to share on like how you yourself determine if a new channel, a new way in which you're producing and sharing content is viable, and that's something that you want to continue to put your time and energy and resources into.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because content creation, it does take a lot of time, generally speaking. I mean, there are ways to speed up the process, but it is one of the more time-consuming things that you can do. Like, for example, to write an article that's 1,000 words, might take you a few hours, versus placing an ad on Facebook might only take you a few minutes, right? So it's worth, if you can have both, if you can have ads and content, have a strategy for both. But if you're just getting started with content and you're trying to choose, do I do written content, audio, or video, and where do I put it? Well, first of all, ask yourself start with one. And let's say it's either written, audio, or video. Which are you most prepared to? And which are you most comfortable with? Which do you feel like is the most authentic for you? And start there. So if you're maybe not or author, so probably isn't the case, but let's say for some reason you weren't very comfortable with writing. Maybe blogging shouldn't be your outlet at first. If you're more comfortable speaking, maybe think about podcasting. If you're comfortable in front of a camera, maybe just, and start shooting a couple of videos and see how it goes. So you got to consider like how much time or how much money each one is going to take to produce that content. In most cases, video content takes the most amount of resources because you need the equipment, you need the audio, you need the video, you need some editing to be done afterwards. Sometimes it takes a few different takes, before you're happy with what you recorded. Audio is a little bit easier. You just need a microphone, and in many cases, very little editing will need to be done. And then written, probably a lot of editing will need to be done. So you just kind of want to balance, how much time you're prepared to spend on each one, but just get it out there. Like once you pick one, get it out there and see how your audience responds.
Yeah.
You want to find that sweet spot where you're comfortable creating the content, but it's also in the format that whoever your target audience is, that's the format that they like. Maybe your target audience doesn't listen to podcasts, so audio wouldn't be the right fit. Maybe they love reading, so you maybe should some articles on a blog for them. You kind of gotta ask them and try to find that sweet spot.
Yeah, I want to underscore something that you said there, which I think is really good advice, which is picking a channel that's really in line with your personality and your type. And this is something I've thought a lot about as well. You don't want to try and fit a square peg into a round hole, meaning if you're not comfortable, let's say doing video, and you're just trying to force yourself into creating videos and spending time learning video editing and trying to learn from all these people that are doing video and having success with it, maybe you're more inclined towards doing a written form of content creation or doing a podcast or something that's generally audio based. And I think that's really on point because I'll give an honest admission. Even though I wrote a book and I've got another book coming out and I'm a publisher, in fact, I don't think that writing is my easiest form of content creation.
Okay.
For me, if you just somebody asks me a question and puts a microphone in front of me, I can just like talk and talk and talk. And I generally like video, and I feel very comfortable on camera. So, it's one of the reasons I wanted to do all of the Book Business and Brand Building Summit as video interviews. But for somebody that's like, that's hearing us talk and that heard your advice there, I just want to underscore that really finding the channel that feels congruent with how you can create, how you like to create, will lower the bar so much in terms of the energy, effort, and stress that you have to go through to create a lot of really valuable, useful information. Do you have something you want to add to that?
Well, you bring up a good point, and I think the big lesson here is that area of your strength, right? If your strength is speaking, and if your strength is on video, and you've got the personality, and you're very expressive, and you want people to see you, then video is the way to go. Spend your time in your area of your strength, and that doesn't mean that you can't do those other forms of content. I mean, there are ways you could repurpose content. Like you could take that audio and you could have somebody listen to the recording and do an article for you. or pull quotes from it and get those on social media. Like, there's lots of stuff you can do to repurpose what you've got, but whatever your core type of content that you're putting out there is, should probably be in line with it, whatever your strength is, so that you'll become great at something that you're already good at. But if you suck at writing, and you might be able to, with a lot of practice, get a little bit better, but it's going to be a long time before you're great at it, if that makes sense.
No, it makes all the sense in the world. And I think, there's a recurring theme in the interviews and the people that we've brought on the summit here, which, the way that I phrase it is just focusing on strengthening your strengths instead of strengthening your weaknesses. Because you can spend a ton of time trying to say you don't feel comfortable as a writer so much. The time and energy you spend trying to become a better writer, if you're naturally really good in an interview context, if you put that same or even half of that amount of energy and effort into being an amazing interviewer and taking part in a number of interviews, you're ultimately going to be better served than spending twice the effort to improve a skill that just doesn't feel like it comes as naturally, or it doesn't feel like the right avenue and channel to communicate in. So I think that's a really good takeaway for everybody watching this interview. If you get nothing else, don't stop now. But if you get nothing else, to really emphasize your efforts on the way in which you create content that feels most comfortable and natural.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Good. Yeah. So, I'll give an illustration here, and not to put you on the spot, but maybe we can make a real life example out of this, because, one of the things I wanted to bring you on about was content marketing and repurposing content, as you started to mention towards the end of your answer to that last question. And, it's something I've been thinking about too. So I sort of set up a scenario where I could get your opinion captured live on video. And, I created an audio training series a few years ago called Become a Lifestyle Entrepreneur. And it's 6 hours of audio training. And now that I run a book publishing company, I thought, well, why don't I turn that into a book and promote it as a book that also has an associated audio component? And so literally after we wrap up this interview, I'm talking to my interior designer and my team about taking the transcripts and doing some redesigns on, what was the cover art for a CD set, and ultimately turning that into a book product. So maybe you can weigh in on what would be sort of the most streamlined and efficient way to turn an audio training into a book product, something that's going to exist in a book form. Because I don't think it's as simple as just getting it transcribed and then putting a cover on it and calling it a book. At least I don't think that's the approach I'm going to take.
The thing with the transcript is it transcript, like the way that when you listen to a conversation between two people, if you were to actually take those words word for word and put them on paper and then ask somebody to read that, it's a very different experience from reading a blog post or an article or a chapter in a book. It's not really quite ready to be in any of those forms. So it is going to need to be edited. If not do it yourself, then definitely, get an editor to do that. But yeah, the big lesson here with repurposing content is that, you should never let a good message go to waste. If you've got it in one form and it's resonating with people, and it can help people, and it can make an impact, get it in other forms as well. Because as you and I both know, people don't just consume one type of content. Those audios that you've got, let's think of some ways. Let's brainstorm some ways right now, some other formats that they could go in. So let's say you've got an audio recording. Maybe it's something you recorded yourself. Maybe it's a conversation with somebody that you interviewed. What can you do with that? You can definitely create a transcript. I've seen people put a transcript in PDF form and offer that as a free download. Not everyone here, right? There are deaf people who want to still like content, so they'll often appreciate that that actual transcript. But you could take that content and you can turn it into an article. You could break up some key points from the content and turn it into some blog posts. You could turn it into a case study, publish it in a magazine. You can be publishing it on your own blog. You can send it to some other publications online. Maybe do some PowerPoint slides or a slide share, a slide deck from some of those concepts. Get that on SlideShare, turn it into a webinar. These are just a few off the top of my head. You could maybe do a post on LinkedIn. You could submit a post to Medium. You could make video and get that on YouTube. You can break it up and share some of it on social media. You can pull quotes from it and put them on Twitter. Like, I think I just named probably about 10 different things that you could do with that one audio recording. And yeah, again, it's just, if it's worth sharing formats, you don't necessarily need a lot of new messages to create new content. You can have the same message, the same lesson, the same how-to advice published in different formats and spread out all over the place, because that's really how you're going to reach as many people as possible with the same message. And going back to your original statement of you've got audio and can you turn it into a book, you could also do the opposite. Like, if somebody has already got the book, they could probably pick that book apart or at the very least come up with an audio version of the book, but they could probably also take tidbits from every chapter and do blog posts, do articles, do short video blogs, all those kinds of things. So it works both ways. I mean, if you've got content in some other form, it can become a book. If you've got a book, it can become content in other forms as well.
Sure. Well, I mean, and thank you for sharing that, because I think there's maybe another key point or takeaway here is that, when we talk about content marketing, when we talk about creating content, I actually see that as a subsidiary of the core idea or the message that you want to get across. And if you've got a good idea, then that becomes and can become content in a number of different forms. And as Tyler mentioned, it can be a podcast, it can become a video, it can become a blog post, and then it can become extracted into smaller pieces for more bite-sized media like Twitter and so forth. And I think that that's really important because, I've found myself even looking at the different channels that I have and that I publish to and thinking that I have to create something new and unique for each of those channels. I used to have that mindset, but I've since shifted to thinking, okay, if I've got a key idea and I want to talk about this concept of ideas with you too, but I'll share that, I get my best ideas from talking with authors and working with clients and noticing recurring themes and trends and sticking points. And when I see those enough and when I've spoken to them in a way that moves the needle, then I think, okay, that's an idea that I want to turn into content, quote unquote. Yeah. And I'll just share my approach, and then I'd love to hear yours too. Is I've really acknowledged that that I like video, and I'm really big on it. I really enjoy video, feel comfortable with it, and I think it's the most communication-based medium where somebody can see you, experience you, hear you, maybe more so than other mediums of communication. So when I get a good idea, then once a month now, I shoot a batch of videos with my videographer in San Francisco, and then he edits those. I get those back, and now I've published to my YouTube channel. I'll publish those to my Facebook page by actually uploading the video and then making that a promoted post. I'll have that transcribed and put it onto my blog, and ultimately, some of those end up becoming talking points when I'm doing live events or group coaching. And it's that concept of an idea then filtering through these different channels. And I'd love to hear what your philosophy or perspective is on how you take an idea or identify a good idea and how you actually disseminate it through different channels and turn it into different forms of publishable content.
So one thing that I think every entrepreneur should be doing is they should be building their email list, and not just so that they can share their content with their list, but so they can get feedback from their list. Now, one thing that I've done is after about 2, maybe 3 weeks that somebody's been on my email list, they get an automatic email that's sent to everyone after that amount of time, and it asks them what are they struggling with with my specific topic. So for the magazine, that topic would be online business or lifestyle entrepreneurship. So it's ask them, so, what are some of the challenges that you're facing? What are some of the topics you'd like to learn about? I'm going to take the feedback that I get from these emails and put together a content calendar based on what it is you want to learn. So that's one thing, like elicit that feedback from the people that are on your newsletter, because these are the people that have raised their hand and said, I like what you're doing, I want your content, I want to know what's going on with you. And so if you get that feedback from them that says, well, this is what I'm stumped on right now, this is what I'm struggling with, or this is a question that I have right now, if you've got that feedback loop set up so that it's automatic, your inbox is going to get hit consistently with ideas for content, and it's ideas that are coming straight from your audience. This also works well on social media, especially in Facebook groups. I'm seeing a lot of entrepreneurs really build some pretty engaged communities using Facebook groups. And whenever they want to know, like, what should they give their audience, what content or what product should they give them, they just ask, or they just pay attention to the questions that are asked inside of the group. So you just got to find a channel where you can listen. Maybe it's on a forum, maybe it's in a Facebook group, maybe it's from your email list, but you just got to pay attention to those questions that you're constantly getting, especially if you're working one-on-one with clients. I mean, as you've probably experienced this as well, but talking about a lot of the same things and answering the same questions with these clients. So when you start noticing the same questions coming up from several different people, then you know that that's something that people are searching for information on. It's something that they want answers on. So that's a great source of ideas for content, is your audience. Gary Vaynerchuk, I'm a big fan of Gary V. I heard him say recently that consume a lot of other content. What he does is he consumes his audience, and that's where he gets his ideas for his content, just by listening to his audience and paying attention to what they're asking him. And people love his content because it's exactly what they want from him. He creates it right after learning that that's what somebody wanted him to say or him to talk about.
Yeah,
so he's a great example.
Yeah, I mean, I think that illustrates another key distinction, perhaps, is the difference between somebody who has a personality, like Gary V has a very distinct and strong personality, versus content in the sense that it's just something whitewashed and anybody could have created, and it's just how-to information. Mm-hmm. I think what one of the reasons perhaps that Gary V's been so successful is because he's got a very distinct personality, coupled with what you just said, consuming his audience and having a feedback loop that lets him speak to them in a very specific and direct way. And that gives a whole different twist to this idea of like creating content. I think content can be an ambiguous word, but it's also the right term. Yes. Because content exists in many different channels, many different medias and forms. But to really wrap your head around what makes great content, I think you touched on it there, in the sense of asking the people that are in your sphere of influence or that are coming in to your audience or your community, and then feeding back in a way that exemplifies and puts your own personality, your own distinct touch on it. And I think that's a good recipe to build strong relationships with people. What do you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think it's worth asking as well, like, why should we even create all this content? Like, before we get carried away with, putting out a bunch of videos or a bunch of podcasts or a bunch of articles, it's like, why are you doing it in the first place? And the answer, like, the reason why you should be putting out a piece of content is not so that you can say, hey, I wrote a blog post. It's so that that content can help your audience. Like, who are you trying to reach with that? Every entrepreneur should have a specific target audience, their ideal clients that they want to serve. And those people are going to have very unique challenges or questions about that entrepreneur can help them with. And even if we tie this to a book, a book should not be written for the whole world. It should be written for specific types of people in the world that it's most going to resonate with, right? So the reason that you create content in the first place is because you want your content to help whoever you're trying to reach. It's great if you entertain them, but it's even better if you give them something actionable that they can do. Help them get a result with your free content. And if somebody comes across your video or they read your article and they can take the message that you shared with them and actually do something with it and get a result that they're happy with, then they're going to think, holy cow, what would happen if I read that person's whole book? What would happen if they coached me? What would happen if I went to their live event? Like, that's the question they're going to ask. And that's why content opens the door to somebody becoming your client. It's, there's a strategy behind it, but you need to be putting out content that specifically helps the person that you're trying to reach. As long as it does that, then the strategy works.
Yeah. And I think very, to the point of like the book business and brand building summit, for a lot of people watching this, you'll be coming into it either as an author or as a business owner who's considering writing a book, or you're just somebody that's thought about writing a book and you're looking to get more clarity through the course of these interviews. But when you talk about repurposing content, and that's of course on top of creating something that speaks to specific need and aspiration and goal, or helps people solve a problem or overcome a sticking point or an objection in their life they want to move away from. When you've done that in a book form, you've got the best piece of repurposable content that may exist, hands down. It's like when I hire somebody to manage my social media channel, or when I've hired somebody to create like a bunch of inspirational quote images, etc. I'll just say, look, I'll pay you your hourly rate to read my book, whatever, 3, 4, 5 hours. You read Lifestyle Entrepreneur, and as you're reading my book, go ahead and take some notes and identify some quotes and some key ideas that you think can be turned into social media shareable content. So really, to underscore the point that if you've taken the time and energy to write a book, you don't have to reinvent the wheel you've in fact have an almost endless supply of content in smaller, more easily digestible forms, Facebook posts, topical videos, et cetera, and so on. So, I know that Tyler, you're somebody who has and does create content in a variety of different mediums and forms. And for people that are specifically an author and looking to expand their reach, you don't have to look much further than your book to have a goldmine of ideas that can be expanded on, repurposed, and shared in unique and creative ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're sharing on all those different platforms, maybe you do a podcast, it's on iTunes, maybe you've got videos on YouTube, maybe you put some posts on LinkedIn or Medium or other blog. Make sure that I would want somebody to imagine like the wheel on a bike, for example, and at the hub in the middle, that should be like whatever your core offer is or your home base, right? So maybe it's your website, maybe it's your book. That's where you want to point everyone to. And then the spokes on that wheel are all those other channels, the Facebook, the LinkedIn, the iTunes, all the publications, the YouTube, all that stuff. So as you're putting stuff out there, maybe you're taking tidbits from your book and you're getting it out there. Make sure that it all points back to your book. Like if because you don't want it to just be out there and then somebody finds it but they don't know what to do next. You need to they need to have a place to go or something to do next. So you should always be pointing people back to their book or to your site, if that makes sense.
I like that. Let's expand this hub and spoke model a little bit because we've talked a lot about content. We've talked a lot about creating and repurposing content and finding a channel that's in line with how you like to communicate and how it feels easy for you to communicate. But this concept of the hub and spoke, I think, is very valuable. The way I've always thought of that is like no dead end communication, meaning in any format, in any avenue or channel that I'm sharing something, I'll always want to give a next step or a place that somebody else can go. In other words, I don't think there should ever be a time when somebody finishes reading and is just like, oh, I'm done. Okay, well, that's it. Because then they go somewhere else. Yeah. And so, how do you conceive of seeding in, whether we call it a call to action, if it's for a product offer, or just a link to, your further thoughts or a similar article or a podcast that may be of interest if somebody's read this far in one medium? How do you think
Yeah.
of directing people around in this sort of hub and spoke model that you spoke of?
Yeah, this is a really good topic, because I think every entrepreneur needs to learn. It took me a while to figure out that I should learn this, and then even longer to learn it. But that's copywriting, and specifically how to get somebody to do something. So not just, writing an article for the sake of writing an article, but writing an article because you want somebody to do something when they finished reading that article. It took me a while to figure that out. I've taken a lot of articles off the internet because they didn't serve that purpose. But if I were to go back and find them saved on my computer somewhere, it would read as if I wrote it for like my English teacher in high school. Big, massive paragraphs, perfect grammar, and at the end of it, action, no real recommendation, nothing like that, right? So everything that you put out there, you got to clarify, okay, what is it that I want the person who's going to find this content to do? What do I want them to do, or where do I want them to go? And make sure that that's very clear. Of a simple example of this is, if you were, let's say you write an article and you get it published on a large publication like maybe addictedtosuccess.com or entrepreneur.com, or whatever has your target market going there. Then whenever you give them a piece of content, you get to add your bio at the end, right? This is one of the most underutilized pieces of real estate on the internet, is that author bio. You want to basically, in those 2 or 3 sentences that you get there, and you should also have like a link to your site, a link to your social media. That's a given, but you got to give a reason for people to click on that link to your website or to follow you on social media. So I think that what every author and what every entrepreneur should practice doing, who they help, how they help them, and what they help them do. So it's like, hi, I'm Jesse Krieger. I help entrepreneurs get their books published so that they can share their message and grow their business. Like,
Well,
pitch kind of a thing.
What I actually will say is, are you ready to get that book out of your head, into the world, and onto the bestseller charts? And then if I have something like that, that's a call to action, but it's also what I really feel and believe. And that's a lot better than saying Jesse is a publisher and he is also an author. You can find more on him here. So instead, if you have something that really grabs somebody, says, are you finally ready to get that book out of your head, into the world, and onto the bestseller charts? Then check out my 4-part video training series at bestsellerthisyear.com. And that's exactly what I'll say when somebody's like, I may have even said that on your show, when you're like, how do people find out more about you? And so you don't just list off a bunch of URLs. So anyways, sorry, I wanted to interject there because you're starting.
No, that was great. So like, no, that was a great example. So now imagine you write an article about why somebody should publish a book, and maybe it gets published on entrepreneur.com or something. And at the end of the article, they see that. Now they've got a compelling reason to come and leave entrepreneur.com and come to your platform, right? It could be the same thing if somebody sees a Facebook update or a short article on LinkedIn, or maybe they found your book on Amazon. However they found you, whatever they found, it should all point back to that hub. Your hub, your home base. Think back to that analogy of the bicycle, right? But it needs to give them a reason to do that. And that way, like if you're putting a bunch of content out there, and it always ends with that clear call to action of here's what you should do with this advice, and more importantly, here's how you can find me, and here's who I want to be found by, like here's who I help and here's who I help them, if it has that underlying message. So if you've got hundreds or thousands of pieces of content, for everything from tweets to Facebook updates to articles to videos all over the place, and somebody happens to stumble upon one of those, you want them to know that they can come and find you, and your brand, your community, your platform, and so that way that first interaction didn't go to waste, as opposed to, oh, I just read this article, oh, that's nice, and now I'm off to clicking on something else. It's like, no, you want every single one of those pieces of content you have out there to be like little soldiers for you that are recruiting fans who can come and check you out and ideally become a part of like your tribe, or even your clients. That would be that's what you want your content to do for you anyway.
Ultimately, for sure. And yeah, I think what you said is also really interesting. Some of the earliest stuff that I wrote and created, I just pulled it offline. I mean, why even keep it up there at this point? Because I also got to a point where I learned, to write to a person that either has a desire, a goal, an ambition, or wants to move away from a pain, a sticking point, something that causes stress in their life, instead of just writing from an expository standpoint, writing for my own benefit. That actually can lead to a lot of frustration if people feel like, oh, I'm writing so much, I'm publishing all the time. But if the way you're writing is just more of spouting off and writing, as you said, and like for an English teacher, instead of speaking to somebody who has a need or a goal or a want, or wants to move away from a problem or a pain, then that's what gives you, or rather doing that is what leads to phrasing like the example I shared of like, are you finally ready to get that book out of your head, into the world, and onto the bestseller charts? But it works just as easily in any other context. Like, if you're in the health and fitness field, there's so many pain points you can speak to, right? Yeah. Or ambitions and pleasures. So if you're publishing something in February, you can say, don't forget, summer bodies are built in winter. Want to know how to look great in a bikini this summer by the pool? Come check me out at xyz.com. Yeah. And anything like that has an emotional hook and speaks to one of those pleasures or pain points is going to almost across the board get more engagement and build that relationship faster with less overall content. It's not just a volume game, right?
And no, you bring up a really good point that people are either motivated to avoid a pain or to gain a pleasure of some kind, and this goes back to really understanding like who you're trying to reach. If you know who you're trying to reach with your message, and you have empathy for them, then you should know what they're going through. You should know what it is they want. And every time you're sitting down to write something or record a podcast or record a video, before you even word, you should, in your mind, be visualizing that you're speaking directly to that person one-on-one. And if you do that, it'll come across in your content. And that way, when somebody finds your content, they're going to say, wow, it feels like this was created for me. He's speaking directly to me right now. He knows exactly what I'm going through. That's the impact that you want your message to have.
Yeah, and I think the corollary to that is, if let's say you're a coach or you're somebody that works with people one-on-one, well, you're already very good at speaking to people one-on-one, and now just translating that into a written form or to a spoken form or into a video that touches on a key aspect of that work you've done with people one-on-one, it's a two-way street on creating content. You either can visualize, what you'd say to somebody in a specific situation that you're capable of providing insight on, or if you work with a lot of people, I get my best ideas from one-on-one conversations with authors and clients, and then I back that into a more broadly distributable form of content. And more I find that it's hitting the mark, because when I've created something now and I'm sharing it widely, it's actually been sort of proven out in a number of one-on-one conversations where we've gotten to a level of depth that's far below the surface level of a blog post or a 3 to 5 minute video. These may have been born out of hours and hours of conversations taking place over weeks and months. And so I just want to point that out as a valuable way to look for those ideas and to not feel overwhelmed by, oh my gosh, I have to create so much content.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So look, I mean, this is a great conversation, and sooner or later here, we got to start to bring it to a close. So, Tyler, what would you share as sort of parting advice for people that they're already in this game of creating content, being media hosts, being people that are actively involved in different forms of content creation, particularly authors, and then let us know where we can find out more about you and where people can learn more about all of your ninja skills on content creation and marketing.
Sure, sounds good. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Wrap up everything that we talked about into one or two key ideas. The first thing that I would say is for every entrepreneur who's you can help people. Like what entrepreneurs do is they create solutions to problems, and how you deliver that solution to help people. Maybe it's in a book, maybe it's some kind of other physical product or service, something that you provide, something that you sell to the world that has value. It can help people, and so you have a message that you want to share, which is going to help people understand what it is that you offer. Then yeah, content is definitely a great way to do that, and it's worth investing some time in creating content. But a big takeaway here is loop, so that you're getting that constant ideas from whoever your target audience is. Have some way of eliciting feedback from them, and then that way you really want to points, their struggles, their frustrations, the result that they want, all those kind of things. Feedback loop, now you've got a supply of ideas. And then just commit to one form of content for now. If you're just getting started, commit to one form, whether that's writing, whether that's doing audio, or whether that's doing video. Commit to one form. Market it, right? You don't just want to create something and hope people find it. Hustle to get your content out there. Try to, we talked about repurposing. We talked about getting it on as many different channels as possible. Every piece of content is like a soldier for you. That it goes out, it shares a little piece of you with the world, and it invites them back to come and learn more about you. So just think of it that way. If we could, that's kind of the higher level strategy or mindset that you should have in regards to content marketing. But yeah, if we could, wrap up with those 2 points, just have a feedback loop so that you don't run out of ideas, and commit to one medium or one form for a while. How it goes before you tackle something else. This will save you from overwhelm. If you try to tackle everything, if you try to do a podcast, digital magazines, YouTube channel, and your blog all on the same day, you're probably you end up with overwhelm. So at the time, hopefully that helps.
That's it. That's good advice. Thanks so much, Tyler. And why don't you let everybody know where they can find out more about you?
So yeah, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, you can find me at tylerbasu.com. I'm pretty sure I'm the only guy in the world with this name, or at least that's what it looks like on Google. I haven't found any other Tyler Basu, so I'm pretty easy to find on social media or Google. But yeah, my website, tylerbasu.com, is the best place to get in touch with me.
Awesome. Also the host of Chatting with Champions, the podcast, publisher of Lifestyle Business Magazine, author of Lifestyle Business Blueprint. I'll go ahead and give a few more plugs and ways that you can find out
Perfect, yeah.
more about
Thanks,
Tyler. Sure thing. Thanks so much for coming on. Thanks everybody for joining us here on this interview on the Book, Business, and Brand Building Summit. I hope this was valuable for you. It certainly was for me, and I'll see you on a future video. Bye for now.